Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collingwood for YouTube back with another read along for you guys of To Be Night and Beguile, Book 2, Chapter 10. Uh, okay, did I miss the title? No, okay. I thought I skipped the title. The Bite and the Beast. I gotta watch when I hit the scroll button. Sometimes I go down too far. The village of Welshport had an 8 o'clock radius of shops and saloons and businesses that helped the townspeople run their day without having to load a small ferry over to the mainland. The closest bigger town, Bangor, Maine, on the outskirts of the village, were the homes of their residents. Some were clustered together in the small little neighborhoods with single family cottages, and others were most spread out. Inside the 8-block downtown area, there were few buildings that were designed as living spaces. Most had small businesses on the ground level, and occupants lived in tight apartments in the upper levels. In one such three-story Victorian apartment with several bay windows that faced the sloping street that led to the docks was Matthew Winterbourne's home that he was now sharing with his sister Alice, who had mysteriously appeared to him from the depths of the ocean just a few days before. Matthew came home with two men who had run into, he had run into while he was on shore leave from his job as a fisherman in town. The two men, Philippe Braga and Nicholas Jordan, had been discussing Nicky's sister. Evie's escape from the sanitarium on the mainland, the story Matthew eavesdropped on, matched a very peculiar tale his sister Alice had told him about her friend from the hospital. It wasn't hard to connect the dots, and Matthew promised Philip and Nick that Alice could find Evie. In the apartment, Alice kept herself busy watering Matthew's plants he didn't have until Alice showed up. She was a special woman, a woman who had a connection to nature and all the things that made Earth so special, but her eccentric persona was offsetting to most people. They all found her strange, which made life for the Winterbourne siblings difficult. While she was at Wyncliffe, Matthew was able to make a life for himself without having to worry about his sister. As the small apartment opened and Matthew entered with Nick and Philip, Alice seemed to have known they were coming. She had set a small card table up in the little living room with 3 places for tea. "You're late," Alice said, not returning from the window of the apartment as she watered one of her many plant friends. "Alice, this is Nicholas and Philip. They need your help," Matthew's voice said, his serious tone reaching Alice's ears as sincere and worrisome. She said, placing the watering can on a side table. "What kind of help do they need exactly?" Alice replied somewhat cautiously. "The woman you met at Wyncliffe, was her name Evie?" Matthew asked as Philip and Nick flanked him on each side. "Yes," Alice replied. "Why, this is her brother and her friend. They're worried about where she might be, and I know that you can help. They fear she's in danger," Matthew said. "I'd sincerely appreciate your help, Miss Winterbourne. Evie is my best friend, and I think that wherever she isn't safe. If you can please help us," Nick added. "Why do you think I can help?" Alice asked, sitting in an open chair near a window that was framed with 2 large ivy plants that had grown so large in 3 days since it was purchased that they looked much older than they were. "Alice, it's okay. You can be who you are," Matthew said, encouraging his sister, who was hiding her abilities from the newcomers. "But Matthew, you told me I couldn't," she said. "I did, I know I did, but perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps this was the person you were gifted with everything you can do to help people like Evie. It was different before. I was too scared for you and what people wanted would do to you, sir, if they knew. But Evie really needs your help now, and she's your friend," Matthew explained. "She is my friend, and I've been doing everything I can to block out what has happened to her because I was afraid. But if you trust these two men, I will help." "I would be glad to," Alice replied. "Give me your hand," she added, standing up and coming over to Nick. Nicholas looked at Philip, whose worry about Evie's safety was Sebastian, whom he suspected as having kidnapped her from Windcliff, was groaning more and more dire by the hour. Nick didn't know what to do with his hand, but Philip nudged his chin up, encouraging him to play along with Alice. Nick stepped forward slightly and swallowed hard. He extended his hands out to Alice, who grabbed hold. His hands were rough, a sign of all the hard work he had been doing back in England since the Jordan family had fallen out of the high society, and he was forced to work on in a factory. Alice could also feel his energy through his hands. He was kind, loving. He was worried, frantic, and scared of his sister. She smiled at him, seeing her own brother in Nick's protective gaze. "I want you, Nicholas, to close your eyes and breathe in deep. Take in all the sounds that you hear and focus on an image in your mind. That is your sister who, or or reminds you most of her. Do you understand?" Alice asked. Nick nodded. He did. The two closed their eyes right away. Alice could feel their connection even deeper than before as Nicholas began to focus on Evie. Alice opened her eyes, and they were completely white. The iris had rolled to the back of her head. Her skin would flash scales and back to human skin, then flash scales again. Her neck, her neck would flash the gashes of her gills, then then back to normal again. She was now in a trance-like state in her mind. A vision began to play out. She felt a breeze, a strong breeze, and saw trees and flowers. But it was not just a random bunch of trees that she was seeing. The earth was showing her a forest, thick and lush, filled with beech trees and pines. The greens were so vivid and every shade of green that a person could imagine. She was now inside the forest herself, her body transporting itself telepathically as if she were really walking the grassy path inside where the canopy of trees blocked out the Welshport sky. "It's cool here. I can smell the sea, but I do not see it," Alice said aloud. "Do you see Evie?" Philip asked. "Is she with anyone?" Uh, he did, he added, expecting her to describe Sebastian. "Silence!" Alice ordered. "I see thick trunks of trees and grass. So much grass. The cool air tells me that I am in a place that is safe, a place that is almost remote but accessible. Yes, it feels as if it is somewhere far, but we can be where this place is. There is a little cottage in the distance." "I see it. I can see the cottage," Alice added. "Alice, can you tell us where the cottage is?" Matthew asked. "It's here on the island. It's here. I believe it's here," she said. "Is Evie there?" Matthew asked again. Alice began to speak, but suddenly stopped in her mind. She began to walk closer to the cottage to get a better look. It was painted white, but the paint had been aged, several decades old. It was showing the gray of the rocks under it now. The shutters on all the windows were a pale color. Alice guessed they used to be bright blue, but had since become gray. "It's so quiet," Alice said. "Please, Alice, if you can see Evie there, please tell us. There aren't too many cottages like this one on Welshport. We could easily narrow them down," Philip said. Alice stepped forward in her mind. She could feel the air again, cool and salty. She stepped closer to a first floor window of the cottage to try to look inside. I can see it, Nick said. I can see it too. Their connection was now floating like an electrical current between Nick and Alice, back and forth, and he could see what she was seeing, vividly, clearly, and almost as if he were there too. What else do you see? Matthew asked. Shadows, Alice and Nick both said at the same time. A shiver ran up Philip's spine. There is someone there. I can see someone standing there, Alice said. Yes, I see him too, Nick confirmed. Alice stepped closer to the window. She squinted to allow her eyes to adjust to the light from the outside, to the darkness of the room, the cottage. She could smell something putrid and rotten. It was death. As she moved her face closer to the window, out of the shadows came a single large tarantula crawling upside down over the top of the window sill. Then another, then two more, then four and five and six at the time. Soon Alice was swatting hundreds of, if not thousands, of large, hairy black tarantulas from her face. She screamed and continued to swat at them as she kept flowing out of the windows like they could never stop. And then, without a second to think, Alice stood firm on the ground and clenched her fist and screamed into the open window, like a banshee cracking the sky above, with a hellish yelp to prove her powers. I am not deterred, she growled into the black shadows of the inside of the cottage, and then the tarantulas vanished. There was a brief moment quiet before the smell of death reappeared, and it was quiet. Alice, Nick whispered, from his unconscious state of mind still latched onto her telepathic. He could feel himself become nervous with his silence. His stomach in knots, his blood racing, his mind clouded with deadly thoughts. Then Alice, stoic and brave, picked back into a dark window of the small house. But slowly out of the shadows, like a figure emerging, a vat of molasses, a dark figure appeared with a taste for blood on his lips. It was Sebastian, in the monstrous vampire form. He lunged at Alice deep from the shadows of the room, with his mouth open, ready for her blood. He rushed the window like a phantom of darkness, with his mouth gaping, his fangs aching for a neck to pierce, and his eyes black like the night, her skin cold and transparent. This wasn't earthbound Sebastian, but the soul this was in him that was in him now. Soul Sebastian that was the vampire. He was different in this form. Pure coldness and malice, purely targeted on creating death and pain, whatever he was. It was this soul, this spirit lurked inside each bound Sebastian, and it was this that sparked the fears in all who knew that Sebastian was now. Alice screamed and fell backwards onto the grass in her vision, and her body in the apartment, and at the same time both she and Nick screamed and unlatched their hands, quick, which quickly released them from the terrifying vision of cabin of the woods and of the beast that was Sebastian. What? What happened? Matthew exclaimed as Alice's eyes came back to normal. What did you see? Philip knew that what they saw. His old friend, that his own blood helped create. It was him, wasn't it? Philip said, of his old friend who had become one of the darkness. That, what was that? What was that? Nick shouted, unable to figure out it was if that was a human or animal. That creature has Evie, doesn't he? Alice said, connecting the dots. Creature, Matthew asked, unsure of what his sister was saying. What creature? That was Sebastian, Nick asked, turning to Philip for an explanation. Does that monster have my sister, Philip? Why didn't you tell me he was what he is? What is he? We have to we have to get to her. We have to save her from him before it's too late, Evie's brother added. Where is this cabin? Matthew asked. The only cabin I can think Sebastian would go to is the one in the Terramore Forest, just before the edge of the western ridge of the island. His grandmother's family used to own a small house there that he loved when he was a kid. That has to be the one, Philip said. We have to go. There's no time to lose, Nick said, turning from Philip to Alice. Thank you for your help. I don't know how to repay you. Take me. You'll need me when you face that monster, Alice said. Nick didn't want to endanger her. He looked over at her brother Matthew, who shrugged. She can really help point the way, Matthew said. To cloak the clock was ticking, and the group did have a very short window of time before Sebastian woke, before his daytime slumber. They all agreed, and the group of four quickly rushed out the Lynn Matthews Small village apartment and headed their way to the edge of the Terramore Forest to find and save Evie Jordan from her monstrous husband, Sebastian. The overcast sky with blobs of winter clouds held on throughout the day over Welshport. The main drawing room inside of Terramore House would flash light and dark as clouds passed over the sun in bursts of peek-a-boo-like games. Jacob Lord, freshly shaven and dashing in his dark gray suit, walked in to see his mother Rebecca with a stern look on her face, sitting in a large golden sofa with her maid Georgina standing at her side. Both were facing the drawing-room doorway, across from Rebecca with her back to Jacob, was Celeste Devaney, who stood up quickly to face Jacob. What's this? Jacob wondered, as the energy in the room was tense and ominous. Celeste squeezed her own hands that were in a fight ball at her waist, but said nothing. She clenched her jaw and expected Jacob to see right through what was happening and possibly reveal her family's secret to Rebecca. Thank you, Miss Davinia. You may go, Rebecca said, excusing Celeste. I think I should stay, ma'am, Celeste replied bravely. Are you going to tell me what this is about, or do I need to call one of your psychics to have them read more tarots? Jacob said snidely. Miss Davinia told me that last night you punished your daughter and locked her in the turret room, which is intolerable cruel, Jacob, even for you. It's no wonder she didn't come to dinner. When I asked you why she didn't come down to dinner, you lied. You said she wasn't feeling well. Get out of that room, Rebecca ordered. Get her out of that room, Rebecca ordered. What else did Celeste tell you? Jacob said, looking dead in Celeste's fearful eyes, thinking that perhaps she had mentioned Sabrina or the night they shared together when he blackmailed her into bed. Rebecca turned to her wicked son and suspiciously. Narrowed her eyes suspiciously. What else is there to say? Jacob shrugged childishly. Get your child and bring her down here. Celeste can wash her up, and hopefully the poor thing isn't too damaged to function. I know you have a basic understanding of human life, Jacob, but this is very dark. Do you know what this would do to her, locking her away like this? Rebecca asked. She's being punished. She knows what she did. The punishment fits what she has done, Jacob replied coldly. What on earth could a 10-year-old child do to deserve this type of punishment from her father? Give Georgina the key right now, and she will go get Charlotte, Rebecca ordered. A 10-year-old girl, Jacob said with a grin, looking at Celeste, knowing full well a grown woman's spirit was dwelling inside that 10-year-old girl. Jacob was sure now that Celeste didn't give up her full knowledge of Sabrina living inside Charlotte, or anything else she had done. Rebecca was clearly in the dark about everything, but he wondered, should he drop the bomb or use it in his advantage? It could be a very good insurance policy going forward, along with what he had on Celeste's family. He removed the key from his jacket pocket and handed it to Georgina, but never unlocked his gaze from Celeste, who he found utterly stunning in the cool light coming from the windows of the drawing room. Georgina grabbed the key and quickly made her way to the chariot room. Honestly, Jacob, the things you plan, the things you do without even consulting me. I could have easily said that this punishment for whatever she did was out of line, Rebecca offered. Yes, well, I doubt that, Mother, Jacob answered, sitting himself across from her, Celeste still standing there like a marble statue. Are you going to tell me? Rebecca asked in frustration. Why don't I let Celeste explain? Is she was there? Weren't you, Miss Deviney? He said, putting her on the spot. Celeste lifted a brown, nervously flattened the front of her long dress that had periwinkles in green and hydrangeas in blue, all cascading down in front of an ornate design that caught her eye of any onlooker. Sir, it's not for me to say what she did, only that I feared for her and wanted her to finish out whatever punishment you saw fit in her room, Celeste said, which was what she had told Rebecca. How very diplomatic of you, Jacob sniffed. Over at the terror door, Georgina frantically unlocked it. She opened it and saw only darkness at first, but then inside she could see a small lamp, lit with a smidge of sun peeking from the three rectangular stained glass windows. Georgina, who was in reality Charlotte's birth mother, Mary in a new body, struggled to find the little girl who was hiding in a small closet to the side of the circular room. Charlotte, Charlotte, on, honey, it's me, it's Georgina, the maid said. Charlotte came out of the closet, her long blonde hair tied in the messy braids that had fallen out of link as the hours passed along in the room. She was frightened at first, unsure of why Georgina had come and not Celeste or Jacob. But then, in a powerful feeling in her mind from Sabrina, Charlotte could see through the magic that was over Georgina's body, and could see that Georgina was truly Mary, her mother. Georgina, Charlotte said, not believing what she was being shown, but the spirit of Sabrina inside of her. Come on, dear, your grandmother has freed you. Celeste is downstairs waiting for you, Georgina said, extending her hand for Charlotte to grab it. You're not Georgina. I can see you. I can see you, the little girl said in glee and ran up to Georgina and hushed her tightly. Mother, is it really you? She asked, with so much happiness in her voice that Georgina shed a small tear in their embrace. How can you see me? How did you know? Georgina asked. Aunt Sabrina, she helps me see everything for what it really is. She helps me, Charlotte replied with her face buried in her mother's puffy sleeved shoulder. You must keep it a secret from everyone, Charlotte, especially your father. It's the only way I can be near to you and keep you safe. If your father was to discover me hidden behind Georgina's face, I don't know what it would do to me, what he would do to me. Do you understand? Georgina asked. Yes, I understand, Charlotte's little voice replied. That's a good girl, Georgina said. I have done something bad. That's why I'm here. Charlotte added, no, no, my love, you haven't. Your father is, well, he sometimes does things that go beyond understanding, Georgina oddly replied, protecting the man who destroyed her life when she lived as Mary. Even now he had a power over her heart. No, mother. Sabrina and I made a plan with Celeste to the young Lord Heiress. Paused and looked at the floor. Do what, Charlotte? Charlotte looked up at her dirty, bare feet and said nothing. She only moved her fingers across her neck, significing death. Georgina's eyes widened. Oh, against your father? Charlotte nodded, her head confirming. I see. Let's just forget all about this and stay close to me. Okay, no more of this kind of talk, Sabrina, too. Georgina ordered, feeling odd about the whole plot. I understand. Do you hate me? Charlotte asked frowning. I could never hate you, never. I changed my whole entire body, my life, my face, my world just to be near you. I'm here now in this body to be with you forever. Now come, they're waiting for us in the drawing room. Georgina asked, completely chilled by her own child's murderous plan. Back in the drawing room, Rebecca was growing more and more frustrated with her son's antics. She thought about the conversation she had with Eliza about how evil was lurking within the walls of Terramore itself. In the back of her mind, through she thought about her missing grandson Sebastian. Was Sebastian evil like Gaspar's last words, or was it Jacob? Eliza was responsible for Sebastian's ungodly return and vanishing, but he could he be the evil in their midst? She wondered if perhaps the evil wasn't Sebastian and was sitting in front of her in the form of her own son, a cruel man who would stop at nothing to get what he wanted, even reincarnate his own child in the turret. Why didn't you come to me as Celeste did with the matter of Charlotte? Rebecca asked, still trying to connect the dots. Because she's my child, not yours. I decide whether or not she should be punished for something, not you. Don't you think you don't you think enough on your don't you think you have enough on your plate? The business, this household, Jacob said, the business has its proper mechanisms to take care of itself. You know that. And this household is the utmost importance, including all who dwell have, including my granddaughter. You will not punish her this way ever again without consulting me. Is that clear? Rebecca asked sternly. How dare you, mother? How dare you intervene on how I deal with my child? And when she does things that need to a punishment such as this, Celeste may have told you what the punishment was, but she didn't tell you the whole situation. And I am sure she wouldn't mind if I explained so that you have some sort of context. What do you say, Celeste? Wouldn't that make more sense for my mother to know before she lays down the law like this? Jacob said, hinting and revealing that Celeste and Charlotte, with Sabrina's help, plotted to kill Jacob. Celeste was frightened. She didn't want to be known as an attempted murder, especially of Jacob, who, despite his unpopularity within Terramore, was still Rebecca's son. Rebecca would surely denounce Celeste and most likely have her arrested for trying to stab Jacob. After all, it was Celeste who was found with the scissors, not Charlotte. It was now or never. Celeste had to deal with whatever was to come. You should tell her whatever you feel is necessary, Mr. Lord, Celeste said, awaiting her fate. Jacob smirked, seeing her call his bluff. He stood up from the sofa across his mother, who was now getting impatient with the whole game of cat and mouse. She was seen between Celeste and Jacob. She took a deep sign and was about to order one of them to tell her what on earth were they talking about, and suddenly Charlotte and Georgina came into the drawing room. Grandmother, Charlotte said, bursting into the room and rushing over Rebecca to give her a hug. Oh, my darling, I am so sorry. I didn't go looking for you. I am so sorry. Are you okay? Did you eat? Oh, look at you, your hair. We'll have Celeste fix up for you, Rebecca said in a more mothering way to Charlotte than she ever was to her sons David and Jacob. I am, Charlotte said, putting her two little hands on Rebecca's cheek. Well, now, have we learned our lesson? Jacob asked of his daughter. She turned from her grandmother and gave her father a scowling look that could cut through a wall. Yes, she answered coldly. Come, Charlotte, let's freshen up, Celeste said as Charlotte latched on her governess's hand. Just as they were leaving, Jacob followed as Rebecca and Georgina discussed menus moving on from the drama of the afternoon, even though the question of Sebastian still weighed heavily on Rebecca's mind. Jacob, seeing his perfect timing, grabbed Celeste's arm, halting her exit just as the mouth of the drawing room door. I'm going to keep everything between the three of us for now. I don't quite know how to deal with Sabrina back under this room in one shape or form. But when I do figure it out, he said, now looking for Celeste to Charlotte, His eyes turned from blue to Sabrina's friend. I will make it so that ghost or spirit or whatever she wants to be known as wishes she never left the underworld. Mark my words. You won't have to worry. As soon as we figure out a way to do with you, you'll meet your own fate, Sabrina's voice said, confirming from Charlotte's little body. Celeste was shaken, seeing the monster in front of her that she knew could be the father of the only days old pregnancy, and the young girl to her side, with spirit dwelling inside of her, was terrifying and confusing. She was trapped in the hell of her family, a secret, a good name in Jacob's evil hand. She had no choice but to stay. Everything's all right, Georgina said, coming out of the drawing room. She was with the approval menus from Rebecca for the house cook. All's well, we can be. Be good, Charlotte, Jacob said as Charlotte's eyes returned to their normal color. Georgina looked over at her daughter, Charlotte, who seemed to be worried, but no one said a word. She carried on with her duty, but never kept Charlotte out of her mind, and kept looking down the hall towards her as she made her way to the kitchen. For her part, Celeste pulled her arm out of Jacob's grasp and excused herself to freshen up. Charlotte, Jacob stood there now alone in the hall and stared down his daughter. He would keep an eye on her, as she was truly the key to his undoing. Now alone in her room, Charlotte grabbed onto Celeste and hugged her. Both sighed, and Sabrina were thankful for that Celeste had come to tell Rebecca and saved her from the lonely room in the turret. But the question still remained of the pregnancy that Charlotte physically discovered when they hugged just a day ago. The name of your baby's father, who is it? Charlotte wanted to know. Sabrina, too. I have to find out, too, but I don't know how. I pray it isn't Jacob, Celeste said. What would I tell you what would I tell you, Philippe? He would never forgive me, she added. Jacob took advantage of you, Celeste. He would understand, but you have to tell him, you have to be honest about what happened with your family. Open the door to the secret so that it takes away the power Jacob has over you, Sabrina said through the mirror in the side of the Charlotte's room. It's too painful, Celeste said as she brushed Charlotte's hair. But tell me the truth is what it helps all of us, the little girl said innocently. Yes, this is true, my darling, but what if I have been holding all the years that your father, father, has discovered almost impossibly will destroy my life in so many ways. I don't know if I could ever recover now that I have this child growing inside of me. If it's Philip's, I cannot risk opening up Pandora's box. This baby deserves a life without scandal, Celeste confessed as he rebraided Charlotte's long blonde tresses. There is only one person who can help us then, Sabrina said from the mirror as she floated in the blue mist of the glass. Who? Celeste wondered, turning to the mirror. Eliza Good. Go to Eliza. She can help you, Sabrina said as she slowly vanished in the smoke of the mirror and back into Charlotte's body. Charlotte nodded in agreement with her spirit Aunt Sabrina. Charlotte feared Good Island. She feared Eliza, but Sabrina was right. The witch would know who the father was, and could possibly figure out her next step, should Jacob be him. Wincliffe Sanitarium had a brief history in Upper New England. It was almost three mental institutions in the region that most recently opened. There had been two chiefs of staff since opening in 1908, and it those three they were best had been Dr. Andrew Kim. He was trusted and he was brilliant. His passion for helping those in need of mental help was sincere and compassionate. And Maine, they were where he lived, he was recognized as a pillar of his community. But there was also something about him in the Victorian age people would not understand or accept. His personal secret being man who loved men by career ending. It wasn't an awful truth, that Andrew and his late husband completely understood needed to be kept secret for not only their own professional viability, but also their physical safety. But their secret and incredibly loving relationship before the death of Andrew's partner was not met without its own scandal, a scandal that had yet to be born. But thanks to Jacob, who dangled it exposed in front of Andrew, forcing him to keep Evie locked up there against her will and against all medical reason. Now that Evie had escaped and Jacob seemed to be on a warpath, Dr. Kim was working on a way to keep his life and job safe. And the only way he saw he could do that was eliminate Jacob altogether. Dr. Kim's newest patient was the former constable of Welshport, Christian Evans. Christian's mind had slowly become a wasteland of darkness as he struggled to come to terms with everything he had seen the night Evie was taken. He was traumatized, terrorized, and slowly but surely his mind began to wither away like a dying tree in the forest full of lush pines. Andrew saw Christian as the perfect specimen to take on his new counter attack on Jacob. An orderly brought in Christian's form his solitary confinement room into one of the many examination rooms at Wyncliffe. Christian was woozy and couldn't see through his blurry eyes. The room was cold and fit like he was being pumped with cold air from some frozen source. As the orderly helped Christian up from his wheelchair, he moaned in resistance, but was too weak to fight back. Go ahead and lay him on the table, Dr. Kim asked the orderly, who asked a second orderly standing at the door to help. Doctor, the syringes are ready, Nurse Hoffman said, a young curly-haired woman with eyes that sparkled with green and yellow flanks of light. Thank you, Nurse, Kim replied. The two orderlies tied Christian's legs and arms in the cold room where Dr. Kim and Nurse Hoffman examined him. He was still in good physical health, no weakness in his muscles, as Kim thought that would happen with his infusion of the cells that he had injected into Christian. Nothing all the possibilities in his notes that did not happen. Dr. Kim was pleased to continue the cell therapy. Dr. Kim pulled a silver tray over the patient under the large light hung over Christian from the ceiling. Each vial was labeled Patient X, the name of the anonymous patient that died a few years before that the cells were harvested from. The man, Patient X, was a psychotic killer from a rural farm in the mountains of Vermont who had eaten his victims. Patient X, he was a cannibal. Patient X had been convicted of his crimes and sentenced to life inside of Wyncliffe before his death. When the idea of the study his brain and cell modifications came to Dr. Kim's mind. Now, with Jacob using such a personal secret against Kim, felt was time to test out their theory. Kim pulled up Christian's sleeve and cleansed a portion of skin off before injecting him with the third and fourth round of Patient X's cells. Christian moaned again, and the cells of the insane cannibal swam through his body, through his bloodstream, and into his brain. These cells were infused with the toxin that would fill all the tissue of Christian's body. And if Dr. Kim's experiment in therapy worked, would alter Christian's state of mind, that he too become just as rapid and flesh-hungry as Patient X was. The file, please, Kim asked Nurse Hoffman, who carefully handed it to Kim, who was too afraid to get into Christian's gaze. Let's sit him up, Kim added. The nurse went over to a large panel on the wall, with several switches that controlled the lighting of the room, the hydraulics of the table, and some of the shadows of the window. She selected the center switch and slowly turned the knob so that the table Christian was laying on turned onto a chair, and lifted his torso up to the legs in seated position. She then turned up the temperature of the room to a warmer feeling so that Christian's body could relax instead of stay in the tightened state. Christian, can you hear me? Dr. Kim asked as the light above Christian focused on his face. Christian moaned. This is Dr. Andrew. Kim, Christian, I need you to open your eyes and look at me. If you can hear me, Christian said nothing for a second, but then opened his eyes, surprising Kim. Very good. Do you understand what I'm saying to you now? Can you see me, Doctor? The doctor asked as the nurse kept her distance, afraid of the entire procedure altogether. Christian slowly nodded his head that he understood and could see Andrew. Very good, very good. I want you to listen, Christian. Listen very closely. In this picture, here is a man has done some terrible things. Do you recognize him? Kim asked, opening the file. He was handed and shown him a black and white image taken from a newspaper clipping of Jacob Lord. Christian nodded that he did recognize the man in the photo. Good. Has he done some terrible things to you, to Evie, even to me? Or sorry, he has. I want you to do something for me, Christian. I want you to do something for Evie. In just a week's time, I want you to go where this man lives in the dead of night, and I want you to make sure he does not live to see a sunrise. Does that make sense to you, Christian? Dr. Kim asked. Christian made a noise that he rejected the idea of Dr. Kim's disappointment. He's still a bit resistant, Kim said to the nurse. Makes sense. We've only injected some of the patient X's cells. The week were given him to accumulate to the treatment should change that. Kim added. Yes, doctor. Nurse Hoffman taking notes of the entire session. Christian, Kim said, now standing up from the seat in front of the table Christian was on. I'm going to inject you now with some more of this medicine. Okay, this is just to further you along on your new journey, Kim said. Nurse Hoffman paired up. There was no plan on increasing the cell injection of patient X. Soon it was only to be done daily, no more than that. It seemed too much more cells in one day. Doctor, are you sure we want to do this today? He just had this daily atonement of the cell treatment, she asked. We need to make sure that when the time comes, Mr. Evans is prepared and secure in his mind to do what I asked him to do. We have to increase the treatment daily. This should be noted so that we can further the experiment along when and if we have to try again, Dr. Kim instructed. Nothing that Christian may fall in the experiment. Noting. Do you not expect him to succeed, Doctor? She wondered. I expect you to take notes, and when I'm doing, not questioning Nurse Hoffman. Can you do that, Dr. Kim said, surprising Hoffman of his rudeness. Yes, I can, Dr. Hoffman said, taking a deep breath as she switched Dr. Kim clean Christian's arm once more and injected him with the cells of the madman who killed and ate his victims. These cells once again swirled into Christian's body. The pupils of his eyes dilated. He began to feel cold again despite the warming of the room. By Nurse Hoffman. But then, in a strange and quick manner, he began to sweat. He was cold yet hot. He was awake yet asleep. He could see, yet his eyes were blurry. Then Kim pulled Christian's face over to his so that their eyes met. Kim used a small tool that attached to his eyeglasses that helped him examine in a magnified way. I think we can start again, Kim said to Nurse Hoffman, who readied herself to take notes. Christian, can you hear me? Christian nodded his head that he could. Good. Now look at this photo, Christian. Look at it closely. As you can. Do you recognize the man in the photo? Kim asked. Christian's eyes were open. He saw blurry figures. He saw a blur of black and white. The photo, his eyes slowly adjusted, and finally the face of Jacob Lord appeared in the newspaper clipping Kim was holding in front of him. Jacob, Christian said in a slurred voice. He has recognized the photo, Hoffman said. Very good, Christian. Now, what do I need you to do? What do I need you to do to him? Do you remember what I asked him? Questioned his patient. Kill, Christian said in a cold voice as both his hands suddenly balled up in the fist. Very good, Christian, very good. Let's let you rest now, Dr. Kim said as he signaled to Hoffman to brighten the lights and send in the orderlies to take Christian back to his room. As Christian was packed up and he suddenly grabbed his arms of an orderly and bit so deeply that a chunk of the arm went into his mouth. Christian chewed it, and a nurse screamed along with the orderly who was bitten. Blood was everywhere. The other orderly grabbed Christian and held him down. As the terrified nurse Hoffman ran over and placed a nozzle that was on a side table over Christian's face so that he didn't bite anyone else. My God, are you okay? She asked the orderly. Take him to Trage, Kim ordered, as the room was quickly cleared of rabid Christian and the injured orderly. Kim looked down at the blood on the floor from the orderly and smiled. It seemed the cannibal traits of patient X were quickly working. Now it was time to make sure Christian's hunger was set on Jacob and no one else. In a small cabin in the Terramore forest, just on the edge of the west ridge on the island, Sebastian and Evie lay in the bed in the glow of the rekindled love. As she rested her head in his bare chest, smiled, he smiled as his eyes met hers. They had been there in the glow of the candlelight, even when the sun rose, as they kept all the windows blocked from the sun. It was the only way he could live in the night, in the shadows, away from the brightness of the sun. She couldn't help but feel incredibly in love, even despite the fact she worried about what he thought of her and Christian's connection. But in truth, it didn't matter. They were together now, and together is how they wanted to be. It's amazing, isn't it, just how we've come back together in such a strange way. I'm just glad that you're here with me, he said to her as he stroked her hair. She smiled and kissed him on in the flickering candlelight, but then noted a slight sadness in her eyes. What is it? He asked, as she sat up, tangled in the white soft sheets of the bed. Is this forever, here, in this little house, Sebastian? I love you so much, and I am truly so grateful we can try again. But we need to return home to Terramore, to your family, she said, realizing their little fantasy life inside of the small hidden cabin couldn't last. No, we can't go back. That's where everything awful happened. We can live here forever. We can be together alone, with none of them ever finding or hurting us. We eat. We even We don't even have to be here. We can go somewhere else, anywhere else, just not back to Terramore. Not back there, he said, his voice sounding strained. And what if we had do, and what will we do when we get where we go? Eventually, we have to face reality, Sebastian. We can't live in some rose colored fantasy world because it's not feasible for me. You have a different existence now, but not me. How can you expect me to live with just you only half the time? Just keep myself locked away in a room? I can't do that. We have to go back home where we can be with the family together. Evie said, knowing the wife of a vampire was perhaps not exactly ideal. But they won't understand, he said. It doesn't matter what they understand. It's the right thing to do. Jacob is to blame for all of this. Our time apart, your death, my time at that horrible hospital. We cannot let him get away with it. Terramore is your home. It's where you belong, and it's where I belong now, too, she said. I can't do that. I can't do that, Sebastian said, his voice raised as he leapt from the bed. Sebastian, Evie began before he turned to her with an angry face. His eyes seemed cold now. The warmth was quickly gone. She took a deep breath and sat up, her hands shaking in fear. You do not understand what I am, he shouted at her, lunging at the bed. He was breathing hard, his bare stomach pumping in and out. uh, in and out, with giant gulps of air that he was taking. His anxiety about returning to his home, now at this creature of the night, was a terrible idea for him. It was the place he was killed. It was the place where his father tor- the place his father tortured, where his mother had died. It was a place of evil, darkness, trauma. The flashbacks of everything horrible terrorized him, even in his waking moments. His eyes began to turn black, his fangs began to peek through with his anger inside of him that was building up. His hands began to ball up like a fist as he turned to Evie and stared at her with a bloodthirst hunger in the darkness of his eyes. He wanted nothing to do with his family. Now he was different. He was new what he had suffered. He blamed them for, and if he was to return, he was to kill them. But Evie, deterred by what she was seeing in the face of her love, knew it wasn't about the past, but about the future. She stoically stood up and faced him in the darkness, and Sebastian bravely. Sebastian, think of what it means to run away from what Jacob did, she said calmly, with the white sheets covering her cold naked skin. She knew that if Jacob got away with all the evil he had done to so many people, the future of the Lord family, that was now also hers, would be placed in a madman's hands. Rebecca wasn't going to live forever, and when she did finally move on in death, Jacob would control the fortune, the homes, the businesses, and so much more. But not if Sebastian was around. He was the heir, the true future of the Lord family, and Evie had to make that clear to him. Just think about your family's legacy, she said as Sebastian's eyes continued to show signs of darkness and thirst. Where would that legacy go if we just vanished and Jacob was the one controlling everything? Think of Charlotte, and well, what if we have children, Sebastian? We have to think of their futures too. Jacob cannot continue on this tirade. It has to end. They have to know you are back, even if it's in this capacity, she explained. Jacob then suddenly calmed down with the mention of their potential children. He sat back on the bed, his eyes calm and warm again. She reached out to him and grabbed his hands. They were strange warm despite its cold heart beating, the icy blood in his veins. She found a glimpse of the old Sebastian in his new version of him, in bits and pieces, like when they made love, when they had quiet moments, but the dark half of him still remained and exploded in times of stress, anger, and frustration. Evie had to find a way to balance her way around him like a tightrope act. But the thing about Evie was that she was willing to try. She had to. She made a vow to be with him. This vow bound her not only to Sebastian, but to the name Lord, to the family, and all it was connected to. He tightened his grip on his wife's hand and smiled softly. She was right. He knew it. He understood and had leaned over and kissed her as she adjusted her tousled hair from her long from their long night together. Okay, just give me one day alone with you, and then we'll go back to Terramore House. Yes, one more day, she said, smirking. One more, she said again, reaching over and kissed her again, then lay her down, and once more that time they were two lovebirds began to make love, as if they were on a honeymoon. In a way, they were. Sebastian was shot on their wedding day, and they never had a chance to experience the love making, and the passion of a young couple in love. Everything they experienced was euphoric and powerful. She felt so alive being with him. She feared his anger, but she also feared what could happen if it all be taken away from her again. This version of Sebastian, as flawed as he was off with his awful bloodthirst, was their second chance. As they made love, as they came two bodies in one, they both realized they were a team, and together their return to Terramore would unite, take down Jacob Lord once and for all. In her home, behind a screen of smoke, ash, and fire and hearth, Eliza Good pulled out the hot embers in place on the ground in front of her. She hummed a song, only she knew the words. She closed her eyes and saw it in front of her, embers she removed from the fireplace. The embers were red hot, burning right before her as she kneeled in front of them. She continued to hum the mysterious song as the smoke filled the air. Then Eliza continued. Then Eliza, then Eliza extended her hands. In a quick jolt, placed her open hands, palms side down, in the hot burning embers. Her flesh burned, even sizzled, like a steak. Excuse me. A brief grilling on an iron plate. She did not feel pain. She only waited for the right moment to lift her hand and out of the burning embers. Then the moment came, and felt a powerful she felt a powerful energy. She looked out the palms of her hands and saw the blistering burns on her skin and flakes off showing the bloody flesh of her hands exposed to the air. And then, like a miracle, it began to heal right in front of her eyes. The scars that we felt made a particular pattern. This is what she was looking for. She made her palms. She saw the answer to the question was humming in the song. What is to come? The answer in her scars frightened the witch Eliza. Good, like she had never been frightened before. The beast, she whispered to herself. The beast is coming. So that's the read along, guys. Really, really, really good character chapter. I like how Dr. Kim was pumping Christian. He's turning him into a cannibal. Actually, there's some good cannibalism stories in Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2. Just saying. Um, no, but really, really good. I like the confrontation between the cat and mouse between Jacob and Celeste, the confrontation between Jacob and Rebecca. Evie and Sebastian returning to going to be returning to Terramore is going to be something. Um, I am curious to see what happens with Christian. That is that's holy shit. That's crazy. Um, really curious how you have Nick and Philip sort of they're looking for Sebastian. Nick's not happy with this whole like my sister was putting him in a mental institution. Well, wait, her husband was shot on her wedding night. She's put in a mental institution. Now her husband's back from the dead. What the hell's going on? Really, really good character development. Really, really well written by John Philip Betancourt. I'll be bringing him on Tuesday night to interview him about this story. So, book two, to Benight and Beguile, book 2, chapter 10. Link will be in the description box, guys. Go check this out.